Hi everyone, this is Ms. Bothwell, the English teacher. In today's video, you are going to learn about subordinating conjunctions, also known as AAAWWUBBIS. At the end of this video, you will know how to create a complex sentence, you will know what a dependent and an independent clause is, and you will know what AAAWWUBBIS stands for. Okay, so let's get started. AAAWWUBBIS is an acronym to help us remember the subordinating conjunctions. AAAWWUBBIS stands for after, although, as, when, while, until, because, before, if, since. A dependent clause is an incomplete thought, or you can think of it as an incomplete sentence. And a dependent clause needs something to depend on to make it complete. Throughout this video, you will notice that our AAAWWUBBIS words is a part of the dependent clause. So let's look at an example. After we left the movie. After is one of our AAAWWUBBIS words. After we left the movie is an incomplete thought, so it will be considered a dependent clause. An independent clause are complete sentences and they can stand alone. Let's look at an example. We went to the Dairy Queen. That is a complete sentence, also known as an independent clause. So now we are going to look at complex sentences, which is joining our dependent and our independent clauses together. When a dependent clause is located at the beginning of the joined sentence, also known as our complex sentence, you will need to use a comma. For example, after we left the movies, comma, we went to the Dairy Queen. After we left the movies is a dependent clause, and it's located at the beginning of our complex sentence. So we do need a comma to join our dependent clause with our independent clause. We went to the Dairy Queen. Okay, so now let's look at if we change the position of our dependent clause and our independent clause. So when a dependent clause is located at the end of the complex sentence, you do not need a comma. So let's take a look at the example. We went to the Dairy Queen after we left the movies. So now we have our independent clause located at the beginning of our complex sentence, and our AAAWWUBBIS word, which is after, takes the place of our comma. And now we have our dependent clause after we left the movies located at the end of our complex sentence. So let's look at a few examples. If we go to the mall, comma, my parents will drop us off. So if we go to the mall is a dependent clause, and it is located at the beginning of our complex sentence. So therefore, we need a comma to join our dependent clause with our independent clause, my parents will drop us off. And if you notice, if is one of our AAAWWUBBIS words, and it is also located within the dependent clause. So this is one way to write a complex sentence. So let's look at another way. If we said my parents will drop us off if we go to the mall, that is another way to write a complex sentence. For this sentence, our independent clause is located at the beginning of our complex sentence, and then we have our AAAWWUBBIS word in the middle, and it joins our independent clause with our dependent clause, which is located at the end of our complex sentence. Here's another example. Before you leave the house, you must do the dishes. So for this sentence pattern, we have our dependent clause at the beginning of our complex sentence, before you leave the house. So since our dependent clause is located at the beginning, we need to include a comma, which joins our independent clause. You must do the dishes. And again, if you notice, our AAAWWUBBIS word is at the beginning of our sentence, and our AAAWWUBBIS word is also a part of our dependent clause. However, if we reverse the sentence, we do not need the comma. You must do the dishes before you leave the house. So now we have our independent clause at the beginning of our complex sentence, and now we have our AAAWWUBBIS word located in the middle of our complex sentence. So it takes the place of the comma, and before you leave the house, which is our dependent clause, is located at the end of our complex sentence. So therefore, we do not need a comma for this example. Okay, and finally, let's look at our last example. Since you did the dishes, I will give you an allowance. Okay, so we have our AAAWWUBBIS word at the beginning of our sentence, which is part of our dependent clause. So therefore, since our dependent clause is located at the beginning of our complex sentence, we need to incorporate our comma. And we have our independent clause, I will give you an allowance, located at the end of our complex sentence. Okay, so if I were to switch this sentence, it would look like this. I will give you an allowance since you did the dishes. So now I have my independent clause, I will give you an allowance, located at the beginning of my complex sentence, and I have my AAAWWUBBIS word in the middle, taking the place of my comma, and I have my dependent clause at the end, since you did the dishes. Okay, so this concludes our lesson today about AAAWWUBBIS words, also known as subordinating conjunctions. I hope this helped you, and I hope you learned a lot. Remember, keep practicing so that you can naturally incorporate subordinating conjunctions correctly in your writing. Thank you all.